Wake Up Dead Man is not just another Knives Out mystery film. It is probably the darkest one yet in the series. You've got a small English village obsessed with miracles, a pastor that has some celebrity of sorts that literally rises from the dead. You have a diamond hidden in a corpse, a murder that looks impossible until you realize how many people actually want this man gone. In this episode, we're breaking down the full story, that twisty ending, and who actually killed Father Wicks and why. Plus, we're going to have some Easter eggs and some religious knowledge that Rian Johnson snuck into the film. If you finish the movie still wondering who the real sinner is, or maybe even the church itself, stay locked in and let's talk some Wake Up Dead Man. So the film opens up with Father Judd Wilcox, who is narrating a letter, what sounds much like a confession letter in my opinion, but it turns out that this letter is, his perspective of events of how we come to where we are in the film. His grit, his guilt, his crisis of faith, and a sense that maybe something supernatural is going on, or definitely something that is unforgivable. His guilt, his crisis of faith, and him even questioning if he's at the center of something supernatural and unforgivable. But later we're going to learn that the letter is something that Detective Benoit Blanc asked Judd to. But later we're going to learn that this letter is actually something that Benoit Blanc, Detective Benoit Blanc, that is, asked Judd to write in order so he could get Judd's perspective of the events that took place that landed Father Wicks dead. He kind of wants to see who Judd blames, who Judd protects, who he may omit from the story. He just wants to kind of get a true feel for Judd's perspective on the events. And I'll say that for the spoiler section, but Benoit Blanc is a very crafty and intelligent person, and I'll just leave that there for you guys. In the present, before we learn that Blanc asked Judd to write a letter, and this is after Father Wicks has perished and he died in front of a full congregation, or his normal full congregation. And in the present, before we learn about the letter and that Blanc asked Judd to write it, we see Blanc arrive at the gloomy 18th century style church where Father Wicks dies in front of a full congregation, his normal congregation. I wouldn't say a full congregation because the church was not full. But this murder looked at the time to be impossible. And honestly, it kind of looked like it was miraculous, because how does somebody just drop dead all of a sudden? And the reason I say it was miraculous is because to some of the people in the congregation who may have wanted Father Wicks gone, this would have been a blessing in disguise for them. Father Wicks was charismatic, but he was also very rotten on the inside. And if you've seen the film, you clearly know that. But he was surrounded by we'll call them his faithful, but they also turn out to be the same suspects in his murder. And there's one thing to be said about this film, because like we find out in this film, greed will make people do some strange things and often sometimes some terrible things. So I think the film did a good job pointing out how greedy people can break and fold under pressure, even if it is religious pressure or your faith or family, or it depends on your circumstance. But it shows us that anybody can be broken, and depending on what your circumstance is. What starts as this holy mystery, this devil in the church, resurrection story with a hidden gem, it quickly turns into this layered con story, quite honestly, where there's a clear architect behind this murder, and this is a story inside of a story that is probably inside of another story. But once you found out that Blanc asked Judd to write the letter that he was narrating from the start of the film, how did that change your perspective on what you had saw in the film up until that point? For me, it was kind of like that oh shit moment. Like, I was thinking that we were starting to get into the meat and potatoes of the story, and I was waiting for Blanc to make his grand appearance, not knowing that technically the story started when we found out that Blanc asked him to write the letter and that this was just one perspective. So that was my take on it. But let me know what you guys thought about how you felt about the film after you found out Blanc did ask Judd to write this letter. Before we crack open the spoilers, if you love deep dives into mysteries like this, hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss future episodes. It really helps the show, and it tells us that you want more episodes like this. But from here on out, all right, from here on out, full spoilers for Wake Up Dead Man. So this is your warning. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to stop here. So the movie opens with Judd's letter. And that's basically a story inside of a story because it's basically Judd's own personal perspective of the events that led us to Father Wicks dying. I guess it could serve as sort of a confession because the devil can be in the details at times, because Blanc basically took Judd's letter of the events that came and he poked holes in them and he pointed out where he was wrong. He tried to keep him on track throughout the story. And even after we found out about the letter, he tried to keep him on track and keep him into the mystery because clearly he knew that this guy was innocent. He pointed it out very quick that, you're on your knees, your lips are dry. So he knew that Judd was innocent, and he may have even known at this point where he asked him to write the letter, he may have even known who the real murderer was at that point and just wanted to get Judd's perspective on it so that he could just have a different vantage point on things. But do you trust Judd by the end as the narrator? Or do you feel like the movie was quietly kind of pointing out his blind spots and some of the holes that he missed in the mystery that unfolded? And while we're still talking about Judd, let's just go ahead and discuss the whole devil head thing. That night after the pub, he was blasted and he came back drunk on the bicycle and he launches, the devil head that he took from the bar that the guy told him, oh yeah, these are shitty pieces anyway. Or I'm not sure if he said shitty or not, but they were ugly lamps. But like I said, he was back at the church grounds. He launches he throws the devil head at the church. It hits a window and it crashes into the sanctuary. He's not plotting anything in this moment. We know this as the story unfolds. Like, he's not plotting anything, although he does leaves us several times leading to believe that, you know what, maybe Judd did do this because he doesn't help himself in this mystery. And a few times I'm thinking that Detective Blanc is wrong. Like, okay, you know what? It is Judd. It has to be Judd because everything kind of points to Judd. Anybody who could frame him is sitting out in the church congregation. So it has to be Judd, right? But we find out that this devil head actually becomes the perfect plot point for the whole murder. Because on Good Friday, Father Wicks got up on that stand and he stood in front of the congregation and talked about inheritance and sin and started low-key calling people out right before we see him collapse to the ground with a devil head in his back. But this time it's actually painted red. It's not the gold or brown color that it was when Judd took it from the bar. And for this movie, I'll go ahead and say now, I'm not going to do scene by scene. I'm going to say what they showed us, and I'm going to go through what really happened. Because for this particular movie, that's probably the best way to do it. So with that being said, what really happened? So we found out that Father Wicks was still a drinker and that he would go into this little side room to take a shot before he would come back out and finish off his sermon. So we found out that Nat actually spiked his flask, and that's what caused him to collapse to the ground. Our architect, who I'll reveal later, but I'm sure you may know if you've seen the film, made sure that the red devil head was sewn into the garments that Father Wicks was wearing that day. That way, when he was discovered by the doctor, the fake one could be replaced with a knife and actually kill him. So Nat removes the fake devil head and then he stabs Father Wicks with a sharp devil head that's painted red as well. And if I didn't point out earlier, this is the same devil head from the bar. But this basically turned the stage from maybe a medical emergency into a actual murder. So what did you think about Judd's drunk tantrum basically giving the murderers the perfect tool to use in the murder? Or did you want him to be even more entangled in this mystery than he actually was? Because he was pretty entangled in this entire mystery, because there wasn't one scene that, until basically the end, that made Judd look innocent. Everything pointed to Judd the entire time. And I think that was brilliant writing. So I'm sure you're asking by now, why did all of this happen? What was the whole reason for anybody wanting to kill the pastor anyways, other than him airing out everybody's business and basically telling them they're going to burn the church to the ground by burning all his faithful to the ground by exposing their truths? If Eve's apple turns out to be this inheritance that's worth a lot of money. I think I heard the number 80 million, but it doesn't matter. It's worth a lot of money. And that's the true why, because we all want money. We're all greedy. So Martha, who turns out to be the architect of the crime, has known Father Wicks since she was a child. She grew up in or around the church. She saw Father Wicks's father take his last breath. She was basically kind of presented as his surrogate daughter. And she actually saw what happened to the inheritance. And she was the only person that knew. She even kept it from his wife, who, let's face it, was in it for the money. She knew about the inheritance and she basically was going to wait him out until he died and try to collect all the money. But I'm sure the grandfather Wicks, knowing this, he took his fortune, turned it into a large diamond, and on his way out, he swallowed it and took it to the grave with him, literally. And that's the secret that basically poisons the church, for better words, and for all the generations to come. And that's what basically leads Father Wicks to his eventual meltdown, because in a confession that Martha had with Judd, well, not with Judd, it was kind of sparked by Judd because Judd challenged her to bear all of her truths. So she bared everything she knew to Father Wicks in secret. And, when he came out of the confessional kind of stumbling or whatnot, I thought maybe they did something sexual. But it turns out that she told him, hey, I know where your inheritance is. And then that greed kicked in right again. Because after that greed kicked in, we learned that Father Wicks basically planned to raid the tomb and collect his inheritance and retire. And that was the reason he was going to burn all the church congregation down, because, hey, I don't need you guys anymore. And I'm definitely not going to share any of this money with you. So I might as well just expose all your truths, close this church down. I'm going to retire with my money and live out my days and wherever I want to live them out, because I'm going to be super rich. So Martha is the one who decides, you know what? To save the church and to save everybody, we need to eliminate Father Wicks. We need to eliminate this diamond. We need to just make it all go away. And like I said, before she told Father Wicks, she was the only person that knew where it was. So like I said, Martha was the mastermind. Martha is the one who designed this impossible crime through a series of books that she read. That just happened to be on the church reading list. Hollow Man and others. She's the one who recruits Nat, the doctor, and because, he has access to medical supplies, it would be easy for him to poison or drug. It would be easy for him to drug or poison Father Wicks because he's a doctor and has access to these things. So obviously he's recruited, and he's also going through a family tragedy where he lost his wife. His wife left him for somebody that has more money. His salary in Chimney Rock isn't paying the bill. So of course, a cut of this $80 million or whatever the $1 million was is the best way for me to get my family back. So of course I'm going to get in this with you. And she also recruits Samson, who is the groundskeeper, who has knowledge of this Lazarus door, which is where Father Wicks's family is buried or stored, however you want to look at it. It's a tomb, but it has a Lazarus door, which a Lazarus door, if you don't know, is a door that only opens from the inside. You cannot open it from the outside unless you have special construction equipment. But just in case you missed it, the plan step by step for Martha sews in the fake devil head into Wick's vestments. Nat turns the devil head bar piece into a knife. On Good Friday, Nat doses the flask that Father Wicks is going to drink from and collapse. And then because he's in the congregation, he knows that after Father Wicks collapses and Judd runs in to go check on him, well, he kind of walks in slowly, doesn't run in. He kind of just walks in the room slowly. We also learned that Nat has this remote control trigger that triggers fake blood to come out the fake devil head. So while Judd's in there, he touches the fake blood. He holds his hand up. Nat tells him to get out of the room. And while everybody's distracted by Martha, who knocks over the cross, smart to distract everybody, Nat takes the fake piece off, stabs Father Wicks, and that's basically how he dies for real. Now we have real blood mixed in with the fake blood. That was Samson impersonating Father Wicks, as we learned. He got tipped off to basically it was time to come out of the tomb, and we're good to go. So he goes over to the body where they discovered where the diamond was. He grabs the diamond, he pushes the Lazarus door, it breaks, and he walks out in front of a camera that's there and makes this look like this big miracle that somebody actually rose from the dead. And the title of this movie is basically a giveaway that this was probably going to happen. Wake up dead, man. There was no point in this movie after Father Wicks died that I didn't think that somebody was going to walk out of that tomb. So that was just me. What do you guys think? Did you guys think that somebody was going to walk out of that tomb at any point, or did you just think the title was just a title and that there was no way, well, I mean, and I guess it didn't happen, but there was no way that a dead person was going to raise from the dead in this type of movie because this isn't some horror series? Or did you just think it was just a title? But now knowing that Martha was the architect of everything, do you think she is more villain, vigilante, or maybe just this tragic guardian of the diamond? Because she's not the guardian of Father Wicks, but isn't she just maybe this tragic guardian who just, maybe she's the hero of her own story and thinks that she's doing the right thing? So more about that fake resurrection that we saw. Like I said, so more about that fake resurrection that we saw. In the crypt, like I said, Samson was tipped off and he got out of the crypt and walked across like he was Father Wicks. Judd, who just happens to be in every scene that's important and makes him look guilty, he also sees who we believe to be Father Wicks walking out of the tomb, walking into the woods and looking like he attacked somebody. He's sliding down a hill, it's raining, it's muddy or whatever. But by the time he catches up, whatever, he gets punched in the face and knocked out. And then he wakes up to Samson being impaled and he's dead now. And of course, somebody's coming along and walking up and Judd scrambles away, not necessarily in the nick of time, may I add, making him look even more guilty. Like, damn, is this really Judd that's doing all of this? And he's just a terrible criminal because while he was a boxer at one point in his life that murdered somebody on accident, which, he was in the ring. So it's not like he killed him on purpose. But maybe his past isn't really his past. And maybe Judd is using this priest thing as a front and he found out about some money and, he's about to go retire himself and get this old man out of here. In reality, what actually happened was Nat ambushed Samson and killed him and took the diamond for herself because shit, more money for me is good for me. Why should I split this money with anybody when I'm basically doing all the hard work because I'm doing the killing? Not that planning this wasn't going to be hard to do too, but she's an old woman. I'm younger. I have a family and kids. I need this. And for whatever reason, although he knew he saw somebody walk out of a tomb that we assume were dead, although Judd got knocked out and woke up beside a dead body, like he knows that he did that, he still doubts himself. Like, does he think that he has CTE or something and or split personality and that he's doing things that he didn't think he was doing? Or did he think this was supernatural? Because like I told you before, he thought that maybe this was supernatural, especially after watching somebody walk out of a tomb, right? This has to be supernatural. Like, what killed this person? Because it wasn't me. Or was it? But we know it wasn't. But at any point, did you ever seriously think that Judd was the killer in this movie? Because I don't know if I misread it. I tried my best to lock in and pay attention and really study it because I wanted to try to get it right the first time around. But the whole letter scene, it threw me for a loop. And that's just that's kind of when I'm like, damn, I don't know what's going on. Like, what's really going on? Because I thought the letter was leading up to something when, damn, this is what Benoit asked him to do. And then he shows up in every scene at the wrong time. And he shows up in every scene at the wrong time. So it's just like, maybe I'm reading this wrong. It has to be Judd, even though we know it's not Judd. Did you guys ever think at any point that Judd was the killer in this story? So what happened to Father Wicks? If Samson was the one in the tomb, what happened to Father Wicks? Well, we know. We definitely know. If Samson was the one in the tomb, what happened to Father Wicks? Well, Father Wicks' body seems to be over at Nat's house. And I'll keep this part short. before Blanc and Judd arrive at Nat's home. And Martha learns basically that Nat killed Samson. She knows who was involved in her circle because she's the one who recruited them. So who else could have killed Samson, because nobody else knew about this plan other than Nat? And if Nat killed Samson, Nat has the diamond. So, Martha figures this out and she goes over to Nat's place, and, they sit down with Father Wicks' body off in the background on the floor, and they're talking to each other. And, Nat thinks that he's smarter than everybody in the room and that he's going to poison Martha. But Martha, being the witty woman that she is, kind of reads this situation before it even happens, and she switches their cups. And while Nat's sitting there all boastful like and thinking that he's about to get away with all this money by himself, he starts feeling his lip, and he notices that he's about to basically be paralyzed or die. So Martha somehow at her age gets him into this tub, and she slumps over Father Wicks' body, making it look like he rose from the dead, because the others in the story still think that the real Father Wicks walked out of this tomb. So Father Wicks is bent over in this tub with Nat's body at the bottom of it. And I'm not sure how she got acid or what kind of liquids he had in his basement, but he's basically bones and skeleton, and yeah, he's dead now. So no more Nat. And that was basically Martha's final move, because like I said, by the time Blanc arrives, both killers are dead, and the diamond is gone. How'd you feel about Nat's ending? Did the double body, and I mean double body with, him and Father Wicks, did that seem like a good ending, or did you kind of want one or both of them to kind of face more of maybe a public reckoning? So now the big reveal. Blanc lays out the whole chain, the vandalism by Judd, Martha's knowledge of Eve's apple, the fake miracle, Nat's killing, and he even defines the roles of the people involved. But he doesn't, or he decides not to expose Martha in this moment. He looks off into the window, and I'm not sure if he had some type of enlightening moment or whatnot, but he gave Martha some grace, because she comes back after everybody leaves, and she basically confesses the entire crime to Blanc and Judd. And she explained how the diamond was corrupting everybody's life, and how she wanted to keep it safe, and how she watched Grandfather Wicks swallow the diamond and take it to the grave with him, and she wanted to protect it from his wife. And then they showed the scene where the wife basically beat the child version of Martha up. But even in this moment, she also reveals that, she's not going to be around long either. And because she's going to die in this church as well. And for whatever reason, and this is no poke at the Catholics, but I guess she was just seeking some type of twisted absolution for her sins. She wanted Judd to forgive her, and he does. He grants her this, probably one of the most complicated blessings that you can ever grant somebody who just told you how and why they planned this twisted murder just to protect a fortune that wasn't even theirs. Detail. And then that was that Father Wicks gave, Father Wicks basically had a son, and, he's a priest. So, you're not supposed to be having sex, but he had a son and had Kerry Washington's character basically raise him, and as her, I guess, like brother, because she thought that her father had stepped out and this was some bastard son, basically. But no, I guess he was a bastard son, but he was Father Wicks' bastard son. And that was kind of part of the mystery as well. Father Wicks and his bastard son were going to take the money and run, but Martha wasn't going to have any of that. But I bring the bastard son up, and his name is Cy. And I bring him up because at the end of the film, we see Judd, and, he's kind of taking on the church now, and he's happier or whatnot. Cy comes back and basically presses Judd for, where's the diamond? Where's the diamond? I know you have the diamond and all that stuff like that. And, he threatens him with legal action and stuff like this. He's a fake politician, so who cares? But long story short, Judd deflects. I don't have anything, blah, 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 blah. He leaves. But then we see on the closing shot of the film that Judd stored the diamond inside the hollow part of the chest of Jesus on a cross. And you can only see it when the sun reflects off of it. He tried to tell Cy, maybe if you come to church, you'll find your blessing, because your blessing is in the church. And so he told them exactly where it was, but, pissed off young people don't don't believe anything. So, but maybe I wouldn't have took him literal either. But by the end, with the letter reveal, with Martha's death, who do you guys personally feel carries the most blame? Is it Wicks? Is it Nat? Is it Martha? Is it the institution around them? Like, who do you guys think carries the most blame in this story? I personally don't know who carries the most blame, but there's definitely plenty of blame to go around from Father Wicks and his greed basically taking over. And he was already an angry dude before he even learned about this. He was already an angry guy who wanted to basically, it seemed like he took joy in making people feel bad, but you're a preacher, but you're getting people ready for this corrupt and evil world. But clearly you're the one that was easily corrupted. But maybe you are when you're old and bitter. Who knows? But Judd's letter, Martha's death, Nat's betrayal show how faith, protection, and greed twist around each other, only until Blanc is left with the separate performance from the truth. And I know I didn't mention Blanc a lot in this story, and he really wasn't, he was a big part of this movie, but honestly, in this film, I feel like once we found out that Blanc asked Judd to write this letter, it basically kind of seemed like Blanc already knew what was going on and that this was just something that he was asking for just extra confirmation. There was no point where he seemed like, I don't know. His I don't knows felt more performative for the people around him than they actually did in his mind, where he actually didn't know what was going on. I think he was putting on a show for the people that were around him. That way they couldn't read him while he was reading them. But now that you know that Judd's letter was Blanc's idea, does it make the film feel more like a confession, a testimony, or a story being edited in real time? And in that edited story, who comes off as the biggest sinner to you? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you all for coming. That is the end of this episode. I appreciate you all again. If you have watched this far, keep coming back for more. I have more content coming down the pipeline very, very soon. Thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye.